Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast presented by Saint Church. My name's Caleb, and our hope is to help you study the Word of God every single day. Every day, we're taking time to upload episodes onto Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, where we read a chapter of the Bible, we look at the context it was written in, and we see what it has to say for us today. Today, we're going to be continuing on in our study then on the book of Exodus by reading out of Exodus chapter 22. Now, this is a continuation of the Lord beginning to give instructions to the people of Israel. And so as we're reading through this, as we've talked about in past chapters, there are some things that do take some cultural understanding. So as we go through this, I'll be hoping to be able to give you some insight on that. But right now, before we dive on in, if you're on YouTube, make sure to take a moment to subscribe and like the video if you enjoy it. If you're on Apple or Spotify, take a second to follow and consider leaving a rating and a review. But with that being said, we're just going to dive right on in to Exodus chapter 22, starting in verse 1. This is what the Word of God has to say today. It says this: "Whoever steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it must pay back 5 heads of cattle for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. If a thief is caught breaking in at night and is struck a fatal blow, the defender is not guilty of bloodshed. But if it happens after sunrise, the defender is guilty of bloodshed. Anyone who steals must certainly make restitution, but if they have nothing, they must be sold to pay for their theft. If the stolen animal is found alive in their possession, whether ox or donkey or sheep, they must pay back double. If anyone grazes their livestock in a field or vineyard and lets them stray and they graze in someone else's field, the offender must make restitution for the best of their own field or vineyard. If a fire breaks out and spreads into the thorn bushes so that it burns shocks of grain or standing grain or the whole field, the one who started the fire must make restitution. If anyone gives a neighbor silver or goods for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief is caught, if caught, must pay back double. But if the thief is not found, the owner of the house must appear before the judge, and they must determine whether the owner of the house has laid hands on the other person's property. In all cases of illegal possession of an ox, a donkey, a sheep, a garment, or any other lost property about which somebody says, 'This is mine,' both parties are to bring their cases before the judges. The one whom the judges declare guilty must pay back double to the other. If anyone gives a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to their neighbor for safekeeping, and it dies, or is injured, or is taken away while no one is looking, the issue between them will be settled by the taking of an oath before the Lord that the neighbor did not lay hands on the other person's property. The owner is to accept this, and no restitution is required. But if the animal was stolen from the neighbor, restitution must be made to the owner. If it was torn to pieces by a wild animal, the neighbor shall bring in the remains as evidence and shall not be required to pay for the torn animal. If anyone borrows an animal from their neighbor and it is injured or dies while the owner is not present, they must make restitution. But if the owner is with the animal, the borrower will not have to pay. If the animal was hired, the money paid for the hire covers the loss. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, he must pay the bride price and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. Do not allow a sorcerer to live. Anyone who has sexual relations with an animal is to be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord must be destroyed. Do not mistreat or oppress a foreigner, for you were foreigners in Egypt. Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless. If you do, and they cry out to me, I will certainly hear their cry. My anger will be aroused, and I will kill you with the sword. Your wives will become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not treat it like a business deal. Charge no interest. If you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. Do not blaspheme God or curse the ruler of your people. Do not hold back offerings from your granaries or your vats. You must give the firstborn of your sons. Do the same with your cattle and your sheep. Let them stay with their mothers for 7 days, but then give them to me on the 8th day. You are to be my holy people, so do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts, throw it to the dogs. And that is the close of Exodus chapter 22. Now, I know it's a very exciting chapter, totally joking. We have a lot of laws here and a lot of things that are being instituted for the people of Israel. Today, something that I think really matters for us in terms of context is realizing, first off, what's God's purpose of instituting these things? What is he demonstrating about himself? When we end up reading through Exodus chapter 22, we could start to wrongly fall into this idea of God being really harsh, really mean, as if he is being a God who is just seeking out moments of wrath. Because we are seeing many things that have a steep price to pay if you were to do something wrong. Now, here's something I want to make sure to point out. For the Israelites, once again, they are going from being slaves in Egypt to being free. Now, what happens when you have been oppressed? Oftentimes, there can be a difficulty then in trying to retaliate in a justified way based off of how you had been treated. And so for the Israelites, what is God instituting from the beginning? That there is a fairness and a rightness in which to operate, and he is helping them to see that there is a price to be paid when you act unjustly. And so, more so than hearing this as God looking at people and saying, here's all the ways I'm going to judge you, I would actually encourage you to realize that also this was something for those who would possibly be oppressed to hear and know that God's bringing judgment and justice, that he is actually going to be bringing them to safety and peace. Oftentimes, we sympathize much more easily with the one who might be in this upper position, the one who might be in the position of power. Yet, we have to understand that for those who are hearing this, that were in these lower positions socially and that sort of a thing, they were hearing this and realizing God sees me. I have had wrong done to me, and they see that they will have the opportunity to be vindicated by God through his law, through his leading. Now, within this, we see the first half is really dealing with issues of property and understanding of that. And basically what God's saying is, hey, we got to be fair within society. That really is the ultimate reality going on here. That if someone was to have lost something for you, you are to compensate for it. That if someone was to take something from you, they need to compensate for it. That there will be a order within their society. I think oftentimes we end up having a misconception about following God, which is that we look and we say, hey, it's all about relationship, not religion. And so I'm just concerned about what Jesus can do for me, which is true. Yet we see that following after Jesus, just as we see for God with the Israelites here, does call us to a new order of living. You see, God is concerned about the Israelites demonstrating the ways in which they would look different, even down to, verse 31, it's an odd final verse for this chapter, but it says, you are to be my holy people, so do not eat the meat of an animal torn by wild beasts, throw it to the dogs. He looks and he says, you guys are different, so don't eat just roadkill, basically, their version of roadkill. Don't just eat that. Realize that there's a different way I've called you to live. There's a spot that I've called you to be in, and you guys can do that. And within this whole chapter, what we are seeing once again is God bringing clarity to how they can follow after him. Now, one section that I do think also once again matters is chapter 22, verse 16 and 17. It says this, and again, just because people might have questions on this. If a man seduces a virgin who is not pledged to be married and sleeps with her, so if a man ends up sleeping with a woman when they are outside of marriage and all these things, he must pay the bride price. Now, really quick, the bride price also is known as a dowry, which is a very common cultural understanding. It was not them trying to institute a new thing, but rather understand the way in which things would go, and she shall be his wife. If her father absolutely refuses to give her to him, he must still pay the bride price for virgins. So what we see here is that in this situation, the man is committing to marry her, barring if the family basically says no. Yet, the dowry must be paid no matter what. What is the Lord looking and saying here? He's actually looking and looking out for the woman in this instance. We talked about this yesterday, and again, I know this might be a sticky or a difficult situation for us to talk about within our new cultural context, which is very much so real and understandable. But in this time, for this woman, if she was to have slept with a man and then left that relationship to try to go and be with another, there's very good chance that other men would just look by her and say, I don't want you to be my wife. They would have seen her as unfit, as not someone they wanted. And so, what the Lord is actually instituting here is that if a man decides to go and sleep with her, to basically act as though they are married and know that it's going to create this cultural reality that probably most other people are not going to, because of their culture, choose to be with her now, he looks and says, well, she's going to be taken care of by you then. You have to understand that. And then for the father, the reason why the man would still pay the dowry or this bride price is in part because there's a good chance she won't get married. And so it still is to give that blessing, that cultural blessing to the family that was necessary. And so today, what are we seeing in this chapter? Again, a lot of people probably turn this chapter off because it sounds really boring. But we are seeing that God is bringing order, He's bringing understanding, and He's also showing the ways in which He will advocate for those who are being looked down upon and those who need justice. And so, friends, today, I hope that makes sense. If you got any questions, please comment them down below. I know we didn't go through every single thing, so please comment those things. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow, subscribe, like, leave a rating, all those good things. But with that being said, thanks for being here today, and I can't wait to see you tomorrow because we're taking time to study the Word of God every single day.